Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They buried his mother. Then, without warning, they erased his childhood home. No notice, no trace, just gravel and lies. But when Nathan Braddock returns, he finds more than ruins. He finds a war, and this time, he's ready to fight. What began as grief is about to become vengeance. It had been 5 days since we buried my mother. The air in Jackson County was crisper than I remembered. The forest smelled like pine, dry moss, and smoke from someone's poorly tended chimney half a mile off. I parked my truck at the edge of the gravel pullout where the dirt road used to lead up to the house, except there was no house now. There was nothing. I stood there for a long time, longer than a man should stand, staring at an empty patch of scorched land where his childhood used to be. The house was gone, not collapsed, not burned down, not vandalized. Gone, erased, bulldozed clean. In its place, packed gravel, deep tread marks from heavy machinery, a scattering of broken brick and splintered wood, like bones left behind by some industrial predator. The large old cedar that shaded the kitchen window, uprooted. The stone path my father built by hand, smashed and buried. Even the rusted mailbox, which had leaned like a drunk for the last decade, was nowhere to be seen. No police tape, no safety cones, no explanation, just the hollow whistle of wind through what was left of the trees. I walked the site slowly, my boots crunching on gravel, eyes scanning for any trace of the life my parents had built here over 5 decades. A bent hinge, a shard of tile, anything. But even the ash from the wood stove was gone. When I reached the middle of the lot where the living room used to be, I dropped to my knees, not in grief, not yet, just in disbelief. I pressed my palm into the soil. It was cold, compressed, unnatural. Someone had compacted it with a machine. Recently, behind me, a voice cracked like paper. "You're back then." I turned to see old Mrs. Madsen from the house across the trees. She looked thinner, somehow even smaller than I remembered, bundled in 2 sweaters and gripping a metal thermos that shook in her spotted hands. "Mrs. Madsen," I said, standing. Do you know what happened here?" She looked at me for a long beat before nodding. 2 weeks ago, they came with bulldozers, dump trucks, said they were clearing out a hazard. I told them you'd be back. They didn't listen. One of them said, and I quote, "Finally clearing out that ugly shack. About time. Like it was trash." "Who?" I asked, my voice colder than the wind. "Who came?" "The Cascade Pines HOA," she whispered, like saying the name too loud might summon them back. "Said it was all authorized, showed some papers, looked official. But who knows these days?" I clenched my fists hard enough that my nails dug into my palms. Cascade Pines. Of course. The bastards had been circling our property like vultures ever since the subdivision was built a mile down the road. We were never part of their little Stepford cult. My parents made sure of that. I remembered the threats, the fake violation letters, the time our tool shed burned to the ground, and the fire department said it was probably electrical, even though it didn't have wiring. Dad died from a heart attack 2 years ago, and now Mom, after months of fighting illness alone. I came back to restore the house, turn it into a quiet memorial, maybe build something new in their honor. Instead, I found gravel and the ghost of a war I thought had gone cold. I called the sheriff's office that afternoon. Officer Reeves showed up 2 hours later. A solid man, maybe in his 50s, with the permanent look of someone tired of other people's stupidity. He stood with me at the lot, hands on his hips, surveying the scene. "No structure left?" he said. "Nothing," I replied. He rubbed his chin. "That's not just vandalism. That's a full demo job." He took down my statement and made a few calls. Eventually, we ended up at the Cascade Pines HOA office, a squat building with far too much beige and smugness. That's where she appeared, Karen Delmar, president of the HOA, queen of the Stepford mob. She greeted us like we were Jehovah's Witnesses. "We acted under the Regional Structural Safety Authority's order," she said, handing over a thick document with a smile so tight it could chip glass. The structure was deemed unsafe and unoccupied. Officer Reeves flipped through it and frowned. "That's odd. I've never heard of this commission." "It's a new regional oversight group. Very specialized," Karen said, tilting her head. I took the document and scanned it. It had a seal that looked cheap. The signature at the bottom was from someone named Inspector Marvin T. Heffley. I'd never heard the name, and I'd worked construction across half the state. The footer of the document read, Reg. Order RP 4176. There was no phone number, no agency website, no date of inspection, just a declaration that my family home was abandoned and hazardous. Officer Reeves gave her a long look, the kind that could sour milk. I'm gonna run this past the county. Something smells. Karen kept smiling. We were just protecting the integrity of the neighborhood. Outside, I looked at Reeves. You think this was legal? He shrugged. It's Oregon. Weirder things have happened, but don't trust anything with a fake commission and no permitting office. File a complaint with the planning department. Get yourself a lawyer. I nodded, staring down at the paper in my hands. The edges were curling from a bad printer. The seal was slightly off-center. And the signature, I'd bet my truck that it came from someone with no real license in this state. I didn't have proof yet, but I had a feeling. This wasn't just negligence. This was theft. I couldn't sleep the night after I saw the ruins. My parents' land haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw bulldozer blades cutting through the porch swing, the one Dad hung back in '78. I saw the cellar door wrenched off like the lid of a coffin, and every time I opened my eyes, that fake-ass demolition order burned in my mind. By morning, I was done grieving. I needed answers. And blood, if it came to that. First thing I did was drive back to Portland and dig out my old contact list. I hadn't talked to Ben Holt in a few years, but he owed me one from back when we built his cabin up near Mount Hood. He used to be an assistant DA before he went private. Smart, sharp, and born for war. The man once filed a restraining order on behalf of a goose someone's neighbor kept harassing. He picked up on the second ring. "Braddock," he said. "Damn, haven't heard your voice since my water heater exploded." "I need a favor," I said. "And probably a lawsuit." 10 minutes later, I was in his office drinking burnt coffee out of a mug that said, "Trust me, I'm still billing you." I showed him the demolition order. He looked at it for about 3 seconds before laughing. "This is garbage," he said. "First off, there's no such thing as the Regional Structural Safety Authority, at least not in Oregon. Second, this inspector, Marvin T. Heffley, he's not licensed anywhere in the state. Hell, he doesn't even show up in Google." Ben pulled out his laptop and tapped into the state database. There's no agency registry, no permit filed, and this signature, slanted like a drunk high schooler, forged it. I've seen better fakes on parking tickets. So they just demolished the house with a bogus order? "Looks that way," he said, "which makes it grand theft, conspiracy, and destruction of private property. At minimum." I sat back. They used it to trick the sheriff. No, they used it to give the sheriff a reason not to get involved. Big difference. Ben handed me back the paper and opened a file folder. "Start collecting every document your parents had. Land deed, surveys, anything. We're going to need proof of ownership going back decades. And dig through any HOA letters or threats they got over the years. If we show a pattern, it won't just be civil, it'll be criminal." I drove back to the tiny storage unit Mom had been renting after she moved to assisted living. I wasn't ready to go through all her stuff, but I started anyway. Found old tax bills, handwritten property boundary notes from the '70s, even a crumpled, yellowed copy of the building permit from 1968. I also found a locked tin box, an old cash box. Took it home, cracked it open with a screwdriver. Inside, folded letters from Cascade Pines HOA spanning nearly 20 years. Most of them were laughable. Accusations that the aesthetic condition of the property was damaging community morale. One called my father a barrier to neighborhood cohesion. Another, sent shortly after he died, demanded the abandoned property be relinquished to the Cascade Pines Environmental Fund. There was also a photo, taken sometime in the last year. My mother on the porch, flipping off the camera with both hands. The HOA letter behind it accused her of hostile gestures toward community surveillance volunteers. That one made me laugh. Then I got angry all over again. The next day, I contacted the Oregon State Contractors Board and gave them the name from the bogus order. No matches. Then I checked the supposed demolition company listed at the bottom of the form, Clear Earth Solutions. They didn't exist. No business license, no EIN, no tax filings. The address on the form was a vacant lot 2 towns over, so either these people were ghosts or someone made them up. That night, I came home to find something wedged in my mailbox. No stamp, no envelope, just a folded page that looked like it had been torn from a printer tray. Typed in courier font, center aligned, it said, "If you want the truth, look inside the planning office. Ask about Paul Murray. Start with the corridor file. No signature. No contact. Just that. I called Ben, read it to him. He whistled low. Someone's watching, he said. That's either a threat or a breadcrumb. Either way, I say we follow it. You think someone from the inside, or someone who's sick of pretending HOAs the holy church of law and uniformity. I've seen this before, Nate. Power breeds secrecy, and secrets breed paper trails. We'll find them. I want to burn these bastards to the ground. Then bring marshmallows. We're going to City Hall. I hung up and stared at the sheet of paper. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from how cold and calculated this was. Someone not only took my parents' home, they tried to make it disappear like it was never there, but they didn't count on one thing. I had time, I had proof, and now I had a name. Paul Murray. You just made the list. City Hall in Medford was as bland and unremarkable as every other government building I'd ever set foot in. Beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the persistent smell of stale coffee and existential dread. Ben told me to keep it casual. You're just a curious citizen, he said. No accusations, no threats. Just a guy interested in how his county is being planned into the ground. So I walked in wearing my nicest flannel shirt, the one without paint stains, and asked to speak with someone about zoning records for the Cascade Pines area. The receptionist looked like she'd rather be waterboarded than answer questions, but after 15 minutes and a little small talk about potholes, she waved me toward a cramped records room buried on the second floor. It smelled like cardboard and bureaucracy. Inside, I met Aaron, mid-20s, pale, glasses, looked like the kind of guy who'd get into arguments on Reddit about property taxes. Perfect. Looking for corridor files? He asked, raising an eyebrow. You mean like transportation overlays or aesthetic buffers? Aesthetic buffers, I repeated. That's exactly what I meant. He perked up. We actually just updated some of that last quarter. It's all tied to the Cascade Pines visual impact zone. They've been pushing hard to open up what they call natural corridors, lines of sight from the main boulevards through to green zones and trails. You know, clean visual flow. I nodded like I cared. Does that include private properties? Well, kind of, he said, lowering his voice like we were trading secrets. It's a gray area. There was a push last year to add certain parcels to the overlay, even if they weren't part of HOA tracts, mostly old properties surrounded by new developments. There was a lot of pushback. Legal complications, you know. Who pushed it? He tapped the side of his monitor. Let me guess. Paul Murray. Bingo. Yeah, Aaron said, spinning the screen toward me. He was the project coordinator. Very aggressive about neighborhood integration. I think he had some deal with the HOA board. Emails were flying back and forth for months. It got weird, honestly. Can I get copies? I asked. Technically, no. He paused. Unofficially, it's all public record. The printer's down the hall. 10 minutes later, I had a folder the size of a small Bible. Emails, memos, internal notices. All pointing toward a deliberate, coordinated campaign to eliminate my parents' house from the landscape. I scanned one exchange, dated 6 months prior, subject line, Braddock parcel, status update. He's still alive, but barely. If we wait until Q4, the son won't be back for a while. Once they're both gone, we can execute the clearance plan under aesthetic pretext. Make it quick. Use the dummy inspector if needed. Another, marked confidential, included a map with my family's property outlined in red, labeled visual obstruction, remove. I stopped breathing for a second. These weren't just assholes with too much free time. This was surgical, cold, pre-planned. I called Ben. You sitting down? I asked. No, but I'm standing near a bottle of whiskey. I read him the emails. He went quiet for a moment. That's it, he said. That's conspiracy. They timed the demolition around your mom's death and assumed you wouldn't come back. This isn't civil anymore. This is criminal. We've got premeditation, intent, fraud, and possible misuse of public office. I walked out of the building with my fists clenched around the folder, my jaw so tight it felt wired shut. That night, I sat in my truck outside what used to be my parents' home and flipped through the papers again, trying not to lose my mind. Then something strange happened. I heard a buzzing, like a distant hornet. Looking up, I saw a drone, small and silent, hovering above the tree line. It dipped low, circled the lot once, then zipped off toward the houses beyond the ridge. Weird, I thought. Not 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, text only. I saw the trucks the night they came. You'll want this. Attached was a still image from a drone camera, time-stamped, clear as day. In it, floodlights, construction equipment, and a woman in a pale coat standing with a clipboard at the center of the lot, her face partially visible. It was Karen Delmar. I replied instantly, "Who are you?" No response. I stared at the image again. The footage proved they came in the middle of the night. No permits, no safety inspectors, just a team with a mission to erase. Ben called back an hour later. "We're filing emergency injunctions tomorrow. I'll start drafting subpoenas for HOA communications and all equipment logs. We need to preserve every digital record before they start shredding." "Ben," I said quietly, "someone's helping us. A witness. Someone with a drone. That's our golden goose," he said. "Anonymous for now. But if we get that footage authenticated, it'll bury them." I sat in my truck, holding the drone photo in my lap. For the first time in a week, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. Because now they weren't just going to pay for what they did. They were going to choke on the truth. The wind was sharp that morning, colder than it should have been for early spring. I parked the truck in the same pullout where the old gravel drive used to start, and this time I brought a ladder, a small post driver, and a stainless steel plaque I had custom made. The plaque read, "In loving memory of Grace and John Braddock, this land is family. This land remembers." I'd debated whether to use "was" or "is," but this place is still theirs. No HOA paperwork, no bulldozer, no smug white-toothed Karen was going to rewrite that truth. I set the plaque just off the foundation line, one of the few cracked footings still poking through the disturbed earth. I leveled the post, tightened the bolts, and stood there for a while, letting the silence stretch out. I hadn't brought anyone with me. I didn't want a funeral or a speech or flowers. I wanted presents. I poured out a small flask of Mom's favorite brandy into the soil. A strange ritual maybe, but she'd have gotten a kick out of it. Then I left. The next morning, I got a call from a blocked number. No greeting. A woman's voice. "You might want to check the lot," she said. Click. When I arrived, the plaque was gone. The post bent at an awkward angle. The bolts snapped clean. Whoever did it had been in a hurry, but not too much to leave their calling card. A red laminated violation notice staked in its place. Unapproved structure. Not in compliance with community aesthetic guidelines. Remove immediately. I stared at the word community for a long time. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. This was personal. I ripped the notice down, took pictures, and sent them straight to Ben. He replied in under 5 minutes. Perfect. Retaliatory harassment. Let them keep digging. I posted the plaque vandalism on Reddit later that day, along with photos of the empty lot, the night drone still, and a short paragraph explaining what happened. I signed it only as son of the Braddocks. By morning, it had over 6,000 upvotes. By lunch, it was trending. People were pissed. Messages poured in. Lawyers offering help pro bono. Local activists asking if I'd speak at a zoning meeting. Veterans talking about their homes being threatened by HOAs. Turns out I wasn't alone. I was just the loudest for the moment. The press showed up on day 2. A skinny reporter from the Medford Times with an ironic mustache and a voice like NPR on Valium. He asked questions. I answered carefully. No accusations, just facts. Just loss. Just grief turned to fire. And then she showed up. Karen Delmar, president of the Cascade Pines HOA, wearing a pearl necklace and a beige power jacket like she was campaigning for God. She gave a statement to the cameras on the side of the gravel lot, as if it were her goddamn driveway. "We understand that Mr. Braddock is emotionally distraught," she said. But the structure in question was both unsafe and abandoned. The HOA acted in the interest of neighborhood safety and visual continuity. It was not personal. We acted under the belief the property was no longer maintained. No longer maintained. My ass. Ben filed the civil suit that same afternoon. Destruction of private property, trespass, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, damages requested, $2.4 million. He also filed for a court order demanding immediate access to all internal HOA communications regarding my property, all demolition contracts and permits, GPS records of all equipment used, all surveillance video for the week of the demolition, every financial transaction related to the so-called beautification fund. We hit them like a freight train. And to top it off, the anonymous drone guy sent me another message. Footage uploaded. Full sledge. You'll want to see this. It was a 12-minute video. Night vision. Full audio. Karen standing in front of the bulldozer, grinning. Just imagine what this'll look like with some landscaping. That eyesore's been a damn stain on this neighborhood long enough. She even posed for a picture with one of the operators, smiling, flashing the HOA badge. We hadn't just caught them with the smoking gun. We had the muzzle flash, the bullet, and the confession on tape. I thought filing the lawsuit would buy us time. Instead, it kicked open the gates of hell. 3 days after the news hit that I was suing the HOA, I came back to the motel and found an envelope shoved under my door. No stamp, no address. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Cascade Pines HOA, signed by Karen herself. They accused me of trespassing on my own land. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. They claimed the property was no longer recognized as legally inhabitable, and that until the matter was resolved in court, I was to cease physical presence on the lot to avoid liability exposure. It was written in a tone that sounded like a disappointed kindergarten teacher scolding a kid for coloring outside the lines. Ben was thrilled. "This is gold," he said. "They're doubling down, digging themselves a beautiful legal grave." But they weren't done. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I saw her again. Old Mrs. Madsen, my childhood neighbor, standing at the edge of the property in her housecoat and slippers. She looked like she wanted to speak, but wasn't sure how. I waved, and she finally walked over, slow and hesitant. "Nathan," she said, her voice low and brittle, "I need to tell you something." I nodded. "I've been talking with Karen. Since your mother passed, she said you were thinking of selling. Said maybe it'd be better if the neighborhood had a say in what happened to the land, that you didn't want to be involved." I stared at her. She said what? She made it sound like you were unstable, that you hadn't been back in years, that maybe the stress was too much. I didn't know what to think. But now, she looked away ashamed. I told her if I saw you doing anything suspicious, like digging or putting up signs, I should call her. That's what she said. I felt like I'd been gut-punched. "She used you," I said quietly. Mrs. Madsen nodded. "I realize that now. I'm sorry. I really am. I thought maybe she was trying to help." I didn't blame her. Not really. Karen had a way of sounding helpful right up until the knife hit your back. Later that day, I met Ben at his office. He had a smug look that usually meant he'd found something nasty. "They filed a countersuit," he said. "Of course they did," I muttered. "Claimed the house was abandoned and a health hazard. That it posed an imminent safety threat to the community. And, get this, they've submitted photographs of the property with overgrown brush and what they're calling rodent infestation risks." I nearly flipped the table. "They burned half the damn brush themselves." "Relax," Ben said, pushing a photo toward me. "Here's the fun part. This is their evidence. Look closely." I leaned in. There I was, me, walking out of the house, 8 days before the demolition, carrying 2 buckets of drywall compound. You could even see the Home Depot receipt poking out of my shirt pocket. Date stamped, geotagged. Ben grinned. They submitted this, thinking it helped their case. Idiots didn't realize they just proved the house wasn't abandoned. I laughed out loud. Loud enough that the legal assistant peeked in with concern. That moment, that was the first real win. Not just an emotional one. A tactical, strategic, punch-them-in-the-jaw win. They'd painted themselves into a corner. Ben filed an emergency response motion the next morning. We demanded sanctions for malicious prosecution and falsifying court documents. We also pushed forward on discovery, pulling phone records, emails, and GPS data from the demo crew. Then things got quiet. Too quiet. A week passed, then 2. Karen didn't respond to motions. The HOA delayed every document release. The judge was getting impatient. That's when the break came. From an unexpected source. An email from a high school Gmail address. Subject: I have video. Body: they came at night. No safety vests. No permits. I fly drones for fun. You'll want this. My parents don't know I'm sending it. Attached was a YouTube link set to unlisted. I clicked it. There it was. The night of the demolition. Floodlights. Diesel engines. No barriers, no signage. And then Karen, in full view, giving instructions, holding a clipboard. She even posed for a photo in front of the bulldozer. I paused the video and stared. She looked proud. Ben damn near lost it. "We don't even need depositions," he said. "We've got her orchestrating it on camera." I replied to the kid, asking if he'd testify anonymously. He said no, but he'd send the raw footage and metadata. This was wrong, he wrote. I liked that house. It had character. We had everything we needed, except apparently Karen hadn't learned a damn thing. 2 days later, she held a press conference, standing in front of the HOA office, draped in American flags like she was announcing a presidential campaign. She called me an opportunist exploiting personal tragedy for financial gain, said the Braddock house was a historic eyesore that degraded neighborhood harmony. I sent the clip to Ben. He just said, "Perfect, she's calling the jury stupid on TV. Let her keep talking." I was almost starting to enjoy this. Almost. It was Ben's idea, of course. We were 2 weeks into the pre-trial hellscape. Motions, delays, subpoenas, more delays. Karen's team was stalling hard. They even tried to claim the drone footage was digitally manipulated, which made me laugh out loud until I nearly spit coffee all over the deposition papers. That's when Ben leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his head, and said, "What if we stopped playing defense?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "We bait them, mirror their tactics, create a situation they can't resist meddling in, and this time, we'll be watching." He explained the setup. I'd pose as a newly formed citizen group, the Southern Oregon Clean Corridor Initiative. Official sounding, vaguely environmental, and just vague enough to smell like HOA money. I'd create a burner email, fake a PDF proposal for a neighborhood beautification memorial, and send it directly to the HOA board. Copying Karen, of course. Ben grinned as he slid a mock-up across the table. It included mock aerial renderings of the Braddock lot converted into a community reflection park celebrating Cascade Pines heritage. I stared at the photo. "This is disgusting." "That's the point," he said. "It's bait. If Karen bites, and she will, we record everything." I sent the email under the name Derek Sandwell, Community Liaison. Within 4 hours, I had a response from Karen herself. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we've been seeking. I'd love to discuss further. Please don't let the Braddock matter discourage you. Some obstacles require decisive action to achieve long-term aesthetic harmony." Aesthetic harmony. Jesus. Ben borrowed a meeting room at a co-working space in town. Neutral location. We set up audio and video recording, multiple angles. Ben even brought a tech friend who rigged the thermostat to click on every 10 minutes to cover any hidden mic noise. Karen arrived 10 minutes early, smiling, confident, wearing a blazer like she was chairing a town hall on moral superiority. She didn't recognize me. Not at first. I was dressed in a button-up, glasses, hair slicked. I looked like an architect or a grant writer or one of those people who says synergy without flinching. Karen sat across from me and launched into a 30-minute sermon on neighborhood vision. "We always saw that property as a blemish," she said. "Not just because of the condition, but the energy." The Braddocks were never community-minded. I nodded. And when the opportunity came up to remove the structure, she leaned in slightly. It was a delicate process. We used third-party vendors, paid them off the books to avoid regulatory nonsense. The land wasn't under direct HOA control, but we had influence, quiet influence. "You understand," she smiled, like we were part of the same tribe. I kept a straight face, but inside, I was boiling. Then she said it. Honestly, I was glad the old woman passed. It made things so much easier. Her son lives in Portland, barely visits. We figured he wouldn't notice for months. Ben, listening from the next room, texted me one word: nailed. Karen went on to offer a matching beautification grant if the initiative could officially partner with the HOA. She even joked about how it would have been harder if the son had stayed local. We wrapped up with fake smiles and handshakes. An hour later, I sat in Ben's office, watching the footage back with a mixture of disgust and awe. "She buried herself," I said. Ben nodded. "This isn't just civil now. This is premeditated fraudulent destruction backed by organized funds. HOA dues used for criminal acts." He opened a fresh folder. "Time to go federal." I blinked. "Wait, federal? We've got use of fraudulent agencies. Wire fraud if emails crossed state lines, conspiracy to defraud a property owner, and misuse of community funds. The IRS is going to have a field day." We submitted a formal criminal complaint the next day, along with full video of the Reflection Park meeting, the drone footage, the countersuit photos showing me clearly living on the property. and copies of HOA emails referencing beautification clearances paid through an unregistered shell account. But Karen wasn't done just yet. That weekend, she filed an injunction demanding I be barred from using false identities to entrap public officials. Ben laughed so hard he fell out of his chair. "It's not entrapment if they volunteer the crime, Karen." The judge denied the injunction in under 24 hours. The trap had snapped shut. And Karen, she was still smiling, still too arrogant to realize she was sinking. It was strange. Walking into the courthouse with a USB drive that could send people to prison, part of me expected Karen to fold, maybe offer a settlement, maybe even vanish for a while, retreat to her perfectly manicured backyard and wait for the storm to pass. She did the opposite. She walked into that courtroom like she owned the damn place. Pearl earrings, burgundy blazer. Her face was perfectly calm except for the corner of her mouth twitching every time someone mentioned the word drone. Her lawyer was a walking cliché. Tan, fake-smiled, slicked hair, and loafers with no socks. He actually said the phrase community integrity more than once with a straight face. Judge Linton was a bulldog in a robe, late 60s salt and pepper hair, and the kind of stare that could peel wallpaper. Opening statements went about how I expected. Karen's side painted the house as a decaying hazard, described my mother as a confused elderly woman, and implied I had abandoned the property for years. Ben responded by playing the first video clip. It was the drone footage. The courtroom was dead silent as Karen's face lit up the screen, standing beside the bulldozer, clipboard in hand, pointing, instructing, and smiling. That smile was going to haunt her for the rest of her life. Then came the emails. The fake inspector, the payments to unlicensed contractors, the aesthetic harmony memos. One by one, Ben laid it all out with surgical precision. The best moment came when we played the footage from the Community Park Initiative meeting. Karen confessing it all to a man she thought was an ally. Judge Linton actually took off his glasses and rubbed his temples halfway through. Then came my turn. I took the stand. I talked about my parents, about the way my father spent every spring rebuilding that porch, about how my mother insisted on planting native flowers, even when HOA letters demanded she replace invasive flora with community-approved landscaping. I talked about coming home to a graveyard of gravel and silence. And I watched Karen while I did it. She didn't flinch, not once. Just kept that polite, pinched expression like she was holding in a sneeze or a lawsuit. But then came the GPS data. We'd subpoenaed the equipment logs from the subcontractor that ran the demolition. Turns out, the bulldozer didn't just roll up and knock things down. It was tracked entering the Braddock property at 11:37 p.m., unmarked, no permits. No safety crew, no oversight. And guess who else was on site? Karen's phone pinged the same cell tower as the dozer's GPS. Ben dropped that one with the grace of a sniper. "Ms. Delmar," he said, "were you on the property the night of the demolition?" She blinked. "Absolutely not." "Would you say it under oath?" "I just did." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Then how do you explain this time-stamped location data? Or this photo?" He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. It showed Karen standing next to the operator, smiling in the floodlight like it was her kid's graduation. For the first time, she broke. Her hand twitched. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. She said nothing. The prosecution moved fast after that. Bank records revealed that the payments to the demolition crew had come from a fake beautification fund that Karen and another board member, Ron Tadger, had created using HOA money. The fund didn't exist on paper, but the checks, oh, they existed, and they'd been cashed. In cash. Over $25,000 of member dues gone to make an eyesore disappear. Ron folded before we even finished presenting, offered full cooperation in exchange for a lighter sentence. He cried in court, claimed Karen pressured him, claimed she called it a mercy cleaning. Karen, she didn't flinch, even as the judge announced the charges. 18 years. 18 years for conspiracy, destruction of private property, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Ron got 9. The rest of the board resigned before the ink was dry. And the HOA, dead. The judge ordered immediate dissolution, citing gross misuse of community funds and criminal activity. The association's accounts were frozen, its assets seized, its reputation scorched earth. They weren't even allowed to appeal. I walked out of that courtroom with a copy of the ruling in my hand, and the weight of 50 years lifted off my back. Outside, the press swarmed. "Mr. Braddock, do you have a statement?" I looked at the cameras. I thought of my dad, hammer in hand, fixing that damn porch. Of my mom telling the HOA rep to go pound sand when they demanded she paint the house beige. I smiled. "No comment," I said. "But if you drive out to the old lot, you'll see a sign." And I left it at that. The property looked different in the morning light. For the first time in months, I parked without checking over my shoulder. No red violation slips stuck to the windshield. No HOA volunteers with binoculars pretending they were birdwatching while reporting me for soil disruption. Just quiet. Birds, wind, pines rustling overhead, and space. Clean, empty space, full of possibility. The first thing I did was walk the boundary. It took me 40 minutes. I followed the old stakes, now reinforced, marked legally, GPS logged. My land. No one else's jurisdiction. No HOA clause buried in fine print. No community bylaws duct taped to my mailbox. Mine. Then I got to work. I wasn't going to build the exact same house. That was gone. Burned, smashed, stripped of memory. But I had the blueprints. I had the design. I had my father's notes written in the margins of the garage wall, now framed in my office. So I built something new. Same silhouette, same slope of the roofline, same kitchen window facing east. But now, solar panels, reinforced frame, fire-resistant siding, hidden wiring, rainwater catch system, heated floors my dad would have called rich people nonsense, and my mom would have loved every second of. I added a memorial library on the south end. Just a little room, open-shelved, with a wood stove and a big leather chair. There's a picture of my parents on the mantle. One of Mom at age 19 holding a hammer bigger than her face. One of Dad flipping off a city inspector in '74. They'd understand the symmetry. Outside, just past the porch, I drove in a new post. Solid steel, welded and anchored. On it, a new plaque. "This land is not for sale. This family is not forgotten. This fight was not in vain." Tourists stop sometimes. Locals, too. Kids on bikes ride past and yell, "That's the Braddock place." Like it's a landmark now. In a way, it is. That's when I got the idea. Ben helped me register the nonprofit, the Old Foundation Legal Fund. Catchy name, blunt purpose. We provide free legal assistance to homeowners harassed by HOAs, especially the elderly, veterans, single parents, the ones these snakes think won't fight back. We started small, a few hundred followers on social media, a couple of local cases, but the press did their part. The drone footage went viral again. A podcast interviewed me. Then a reporter did a feature titled "The Man Who Sued a Suburb and Won." Donations started coming in. And stories. So many stories. One from a woman whose HOA banned her from putting up Halloween decorations because themed inflatables incite moral panic. One from a guy fined $600 for a bird bath. A bird bath. People who felt powerless, angry, exhausted, just like I had. I started getting letters too. Handwritten, typed, emailed. One from a Vietnam vet who said he hadn't felt vindicated by the system in 40 years. Until now. Karen Delmar, she's still inside. 18 years. No parole for the first 10. I heard she tried to start a prison housing committee and got punched in the face. Ron Tadger got out early and moved to Nevada. He sent me a letter, apologized, said he was scared of her, said he'd never forget the sound of the bulldozer engine starting at midnight. I didn't reply. Some ghosts don't need closure. Mrs. Madsen passed away a few months ago. Left me her copy of the HOA's original bylaws. In it, she wrote a single sentence in shaky pen. "I was wrong. You were right. Burn it all down, Nathan. It's framed in my hallway. I visit my parents every Sunday now. They're buried just off the back edge of the property, under the tall cedar I planted where the old one stood. There's a bench. Sometimes I bring coffee, sometimes just silence. And every time I walk that land, I remember they tried to erase a legacy, but in trying to bury it, they made it unshakable.